Right, I'm going to go ahead and get started today. Welcome to Tech Tuesday. My name is Tom Levine. I'm Cornerstone's technical specialist, and today we're going to be talking about some basic internet security features and different things you might want installed on your computer to help you mitigate things like viruses and malware. Before we get started, though, I just have a little bit of housekeeping to mention. First off, if you have any questions throughout the presentation, please don't forget to put it in the questions box. That should be kind of in the little utility bar by the actual broadcast, at least the thing you're watching the broadcast through. So if you have any questions, put it there and I'll answer it in the Q&A at the end. Or if you have a question that I think kind of makes sense for answering in the moment, I'll answer it then. Also, don't forget to connect with Cornerstone directly. You can follow us on social media and subscribe to our weekly Monday Minute newsletter for the latest in Cornerstone, courier, and industry news. Also, if you have any questions you don't want to ask during the presentation but would rather follow up with me directly, please feel free to do so. My number should be displayed on your screen, and my email address should be displayed as well. Also, don't forget, with Cornerstone's agency services program, you're the pilot of your business and we're your flight crew. As a broker, you have access to expert services from our agency services program that can help you with your business outside the scope of planning for the future, or outside the scope of what you're covering now and planning for the future, to clarify. We create a customized plan for you based on your specific needs to ensure that you, your business, and your family are covered. Contact your Cornerstone representative for more information. And last but not least, don't forget to sign up for Cornerstone's new and improved AGB broker portal. It's available for all non-broker or all of our actual broker partners as your one-stop shop for managing your book of business through Cornerstone, from carrier and client information to commission schedules. If you have any questions about the new platform and your access, please reach out to your broker advisor or the AGB support team at www.crnstone.com/AGB. So that being said, how to keep yourself safe from malware and viruses. That's kind of the big thing that everyone's trying to do, I guess, when it comes to internet security. The problem is a lot of people don't know the difference between even a firewall and antivirus software, which really only helps hackers. So today we're going to kind of walk you through some of the basic type of risks you might see from attacks online, some different types of attacks that criminals commonly use and utilize and things to look out for, as well as different ways that you can stay safe from these kinds of attacks. So let's go ahead and start by just talking a little bit about risk. Now, there are a few different types of risks that you take on by kind of running a computer unsecured. Mainly risks being whoever wants to can connect to your computer. I know that we all love the internet and love to use it, but what is the internet really? It's just a lot of connections. It's a lot of computers that are kind of all talking to each other. And by having a computer connected to the internet, then you open yourself up to the possibility of, having someone do things you don't want them to do on your machines. Some risks could be things like getting locked out of all of the data you've got on all of your clients, having their information stolen, which can put clients at risk of identity theft, which loses client trust. They might not be so keen to work with you again if they know that, oh well, you had a data breach and all of my data is now on the dark web. So probably could be a bad time. Also, you could have equipment get damaged. You could have computers unusable after a hack like this. You could have, something melt down. Maybe they're damaging the actual hardware that your, entire service is run on. Maybe they're damaging the server your website runs on. So, damage is also a risk in attacks like this, or at least attacks that can come from online. That being said, there are a lot of different types of attacks, and I couldn't possibly cover all of them today. So I'm going to cover 5 different types of attacks and different types of things, as well as possible issues that you might run into. Also, we have some less likely attacks listed. I'm just going to go over all of these kind of here briefly. You're more likely to see something like a phishing attack. I think we've all kind of dealt with them, but we're going to go into it some on the next slide. Then there's also something called DNS tunneling, which I will explain more in detail on that slide. But there are also man-in-the-middle attacks, Trojans, and ransomware ransomware. And the goal of all these attacks are kind of the same, and we'll get into that here in a second as well. But some other less likely attacks that you might see are denial of service attacks or DOS attacks. Those are a lot less common nowadays, but basically hackers just send a lot of requests to access your website, and that can break the equipment that runs your website. So it denies people the ability to access your website, hence denial of service. There's also something called SQL injection, which is where a hacker can kind of interact with your database without actually logging in or actually accessing any direct information. You can use this to kind of get control of a server, and it can let hackers actually be able to get the entire contents of your server with a request. So it's a pretty scary thing, but it's less common nowadays. A lot of databases have kind of realized this is an issue and implemented features that'll stop people from doing this kind of attack. And the last one is a brute force password attack. That's another kind of thing that you probably won't have to worry about, but it's where a hacker basically enters a lot of passwords into your system to try to figure out what your password is. With the different types of forced passwords nowadays, that's a lot harder to do, and it's not something that hackers really do now, but it's something to be aware of. Either way, we're going to cover those more likely here next. We're going to start off with the major one, which is phishing. That's spelled with a P. Now, phishing is literally just phishing for information. It's something that a lot of hackers do because it's very easy for them to do. It's low effort to just make an email, send it to someone, hopefully they click on something they shouldn't. It's very easy for a hacker to implement, which is why it's so useful, but also it's something that's really easy for you to accidentally reply to. Let's say that I'm sending you an email from, pretending to be your boss. That, probably is easy information to figure out. If you have a website and I can go out and see your list of employees, then I can kind of figure out, okay, well, maybe this is kind of similar to what their email address is. If I send them something from this, they might not look. You open the email and, well, now you've given them access to either your computer or accidentally maybe installed malware. You also see nowadays a lot of people kind of phishing people to click on links that kind of get them access to things, maybe download and install something they shouldn't. Normally, it's if you're getting a phishing attack, it's just a, click here, you click there, and then they try to get you to do something like enter your username and password for your actual portals you use every day. And if they have a username and password, hackers tend to bet that you're using that for other sites too. So just, the defense for it is just be careful what you click on. As you're looking through your email, make sure that you only click on emails that, are valid emails, things that are, 100% okay to, open, that you're getting it from someone that you've actually worked with before. Another thing to do is kind of scan and verify all attachments. There's software that'll do that for you, but generally if you're operating on a corporate email account, then you probably have software that scans attachments for you. Also, you might want to check for spelling mistakes. This is actually pretty common in phishing emails from foreign countries especially, but if you open an email and you see a lot of grammatical and spelling errors, you probably don't want to mess around with that email any further. Another thing to be aware of, although it's not something you can directly stop, is DNS tunneling. DNS tunneling is basically where a hacker reaches out to the server that you're operating on, be it your computer, whatever kind of network you're using, and says, hey, I want some information about what's going on in your network. If they get a reply from that, then they can say, okay, then I'm good to go. And they'll basically make their own profile on your network and just kind of do whatever they want. There's a lot more complex than that, but that's generally all you need to know to kind of get the basic idea of what people are trying to do with it. It gets around security connections, and it does this by basically creating a valid login on your server and then using that to continue to log in. They can also do this with different types of software, but that's generally what DNS tunneling accomplishes. There are easy defenses for it, though, such as installing a proper firewall and having good permission lists for approved websites. Typically, this kind of thing happens when you go to a web address that you're not supposed to go to, or one that's kind of like an in-between web address. Like instead of going to google.com, you'll go to like google.com or something. If you go there, then, you know, that whoever owns that domain can basically do whatever they want to whatever you're requesting. A good firewall will stop them from accessing your data as well. If you go out to this website, then normally your server will basically say, hey, I'm requesting information from you. You can't request it from me. That's not how this works. So good firewalls are pretty much the only real good block for DNS tunneling. But another thing that you can do to kind of dissuade this kind of attack is to only allow things to be installed by administrator accounts. That way, if someone accidentally goes to a weird website, the administrator has to approve any sort of thing it's trying to install on your computer. Also, the last one is just conducting staff training, making them aware that this kind of thing exists and that they need to be aware of what type of websites they're going to. Always a good way to deter this kind of attack. The next one is man in the middle, and it's actually the goal of what DNS attacks are trying to do. A man in the middle attack is basically a hacker kind of sitting on your network and watching what's going on. A lot of them kind of use this to gather information and try to pick up better passwords and get better information for other accounts. It's a way of kind of escalating your privilege on a server to really do some damage or get some good information. Basically, that they watch what's happening, they see who's accessing what, and then using that information, they can figure out where to send their next phish or where to escalate the privileges to. Sorry. Good defense for this is just ensuring that all remote workers have to have a VPN that they use to access your information if they're working remotely. Another one would be to encrypt as much communication as you can going to or coming from your web server. And the last one is just restricting permissions for most users, which is just good data practice. An ultimate type of, I guess, malware that we're talking about today that I'll mention are Trojans. Trojans are pieces of malware that pretend to be normal programs. So a good instance would be like a fake folder that says, my PC, but actually it's not a folder, it's a program that's kind of logging every keystroke. That's a good example of a Trojan. Think the Trojan horse. It's pretending to be something that it's actually not. It cannot self-replicate. Trojans are a piece of malware, but the only type of self-replicating pieces of malware that there are viruses, and that's what makes a virus, and not something like a piece of malware like a Trojan. Now, there are also lots of different types of Trojans because they're so versatile, and that's another reason why they're used by hackers. They're easy to miss. If you see a folder and it's labeled something, tend to think that you have stuff saved there, but if it's not actually a folder and it's actually a program, then clearly that can be useful for them. There are thief type Trojans that just steal data. There's information harvesters, which kind of rip all the files from your computer, send it to the hacker and get it done with. And then there are backdoor Trojans, which are Trojans that let hackers back into networks to get more information. Good defense against these kind of things would be malware and antivirus software. Make sure you're having good email practice so that people don't accidentally install it, and also make sure that user permissions are secured. Kind of like what I was saying before, the best way to make sure that a program doesn't get installed on a machine is to make sure that only the administrator can do that. And the last type of malware that we're going to cover today is ransomware. And this is the big one that I think gets people the most scared. What ransomware does is it locks and encrypts all drives that a hacker can access. And the reason they would do this is because they can lock it with a password and then make you pay them for the password. A lot of ransomware will do something like you turn on your computer, instead of logging in, it just says, caution, you've been hacked, call the number with like a little box. You call that number, the thief will have you, transfer a certain amount of Bitcoin or some other cryptocurrency into their wallet. And then by the time you do that, they'll hopefully give you a password to get you back into your data. this password is necessary, and if you don't use the password or enter the wrong password in, normally they'll threaten to do things like completely wipe all of your computers, all of your data, and make you start from scratch with all of your client information and all of your billing information and pretty much anything you could need. Now, this is something that hackers can do, and it's kind of the main point of a lot of hackers, I guess I'd say, is to just, get a good payout and then move on. But the recommendation, if you ever have a ransomware attack, is just to not pay them. There's nothing that, says they have to give you a valid password to access your information. And even if you do, follow their instructions and pay them appropriately, there's no real thing to force them to actually give you a password in the first place. So you could pay them and they'd say, oh, well, price rose, and then you have to pay them more. Or they could just give you the wrong password, let you, wipe your entire system and then move on. It's just something that people do. So that said, there is good defense against this. The best defense is a third-party backup service or system, normally something like Carbonite, which we're going to cover in a few slides. There's also offsite duplicate storage, which I'd recommend utilizing regularly if you can do this. Basically, just plug in an external hard drive to your computer, copy all the files over, make sure that it's fully backed up, and then remove that and store it elsewhere. That way, if someone does hack your computer, you've at least got all of your data as backed up as you can. You can just kind of not deal with them and reset everything. And then the last thing is just, like I said, good firewalls and good malware defense software. That being said, there are some general best practices that you probably gathered from hearing all of this repeated over and over. The first is to scroll over any links before you click on them. You do that just to make sure that the link's going to send you where you think it's going to send you online. If I scrolled over a link that said, go to cornerstone.com, www.crnstone.com, and it actually was sending me to Google or somewhere else, I'd be highly skeptical of it. Another thing you might want to do is make sure only to open attachments from trusted sources. Then you also want to verify all requests for like money transfers with calls or some other secondary source of communication. If you're just sending out money because someone tells you to send money, then you're probably going to eventually get tricked and send money somewhere it shouldn't. Also, you might want to develop a procedure for these kinds of funds transfers and approvals as well, just to make sure that no one accidentally pays someone hacking into your system or pays someone they shouldn't anyway. Something like if you get an email from your CFO that says to transfer money, call them and make sure you talk to them actually to verify that it needs done. That's generally the easiest procedure to implement, and as long as it's not just an email back saying, hey, are you sure you want me to do this? That's fine. The main point of using like a phone versus another email back to them to verify a money transfer or other kinds of important information like this is just to make sure that you're not talking to someone who's hacked their email address. So by calling them or by maybe sending them an instant message, you're kind of getting around that. Also, back up your work regularly and keep an offsite backup or keep some sort of backup of your information in general. Just a good rule. Now, that being said, there's also some software options that you've got as far as defense goes, as well as some general best practice. We're going to start with permission tiering because I feel like that's what I mentioned the most, and it's probably something that's kind of foreign to people who aren't in IT. After that, we're going to talk about some other different software options, including firewalls and antivirus, what the differences are, and the differences in uses between VPNs, remote backup services, and email monitoring services. First is permission tiering, and this is something that most IT professionals do. You don't have to ask them to do it, they'll just kind of do it. It's actually a very useful thing to do within a network as well. And if you're just working on your own, it's probably not something you have to do. But if you work with a bunch of different people out of a Google Drive or a Dropbox, it's something you can even implement on those kinds of services. Basically, you set different levels of users and give them access to different types of things. Like you might be the admin, you have the ability to say create and name folders as well as even renaming them. But employees only might have the ability to access files, open them, and edit those. They can't actually, create new folders. They can't rename folders. They can't drag and drop folders into different spots. That's kind of a permission restriction on normal users, and that's kind of what I'm getting at here. A lot of times it's very easy to manage a network if only certain users have certain permission. Here at Cornerstone, I can't just create a bunch of folders wherever I'd like to in our actual hierarchy. My only ability is messing around within my little area of the server that I have access to. And that's something that a lot of larger companies do, that a lot of smaller companies can also benefit from. If you have a larger company and you haven't looked into this, or you don't think that you've implemented it, it might be something to talk to your IT systems about. Another good thing that you're going to want to do is have a remote backup. And the two main systems people use for this are Carbonite and Dropbox. I don't have prices listed here either because they're actually really, really cheap. Like I think it's maybe $2 or $3 a month for both services, but I'm not 100% sure on that. I couldn't find updated pricing when I was looking. But generally, there are kind of two differences to these services. Carbonite is a offsite backup service, and what it does is it takes all of the data from devices that their programs are installed on, backs it up on their end at their server, and let's say you did have like a ransomware attack or something happen, then you could contact Carbonite. They would, either completely reset your computer for you, reload everything on remotely, or if you've got a lot of data and that would be a little bit slow, they'll send you actual hard drives that you can use to reinstall everything and reset your computers directly that you then return. They do charge a fee for the hard drives they send out to kind of restore everything, but if you mail those back, they do refund that fee. So pretty useful service. And I definitely prefer them to the Dropbox option. Dropbox is just kind of a cloud-based storage solution. You do have to sign some sort of business agreement to actually make it HIPAA compliant. And also, but it basically does the same thing as Carbonite. It just also provides access to that storage directly as well from your systems. So it lets you, sign in securely, and then you can access and edit your drive and do whatever you'd like. I recommend Carbonite over Dropbox just because the Dropbox connection can be more direct and it can be used like a normal file system. I think Carbonite is a little more secure for that reason. Next up is firewall and antivirus, and they are actually two different things, though normally they are sold together as one thing. A firewall basically is kind of like a bouncer at a club, honestly, is probably the way that I always think about it. What it does is it restricts who has access to what devices are connected to a network. So it basically says, okay, I'm Tom Levine. I have access to this part of my server. I can't access other parts of the server. But it also works for outgoing requests or requests from outside my organization. So let's say I go to Google. When I send a request to Google, my firewall should see, oh, they're sending a request out. If I get a request for information from Google, that's probably fine. That's kind of what a firewall does. But if, let's say, I was some guy randomly outside and I was trying to access information from the server, it would say, hey, you don't have an account, you don't have access here, you can't get into this information. That's kind of what a firewall does. Antivirus and anti-malware software is very different in that instead of actually blocking things from accessing stuff on your network, what it does is it uninstalls and checks for programs that are doing things they really shouldn't be. So this is what kind of identifies where the hacker's gotten in and what kind of things they're doing that they probably shouldn't be, and will help you make sure that they can't do that. A good antivirus or anti-malware software will let you uninstall programs directly without having to interact with that program itself, and that's a really good thing because most malware or viruses type software, if you uninstall it, then it'll actually stay installed on your machine. So antivirus, anti-malware kind of software, make sure that you can actually uninstall those bad acting programs. And I actually do have a few recommendations for firewalls and antivirus solutions. My top recommendation is actually probably Norton 360. I love Norton. I've used them myself, and they're actually extremely wonderful. They're very helpful. Their salespeople know what they're talking about. And generally, though, they are kind of middle of the row as far as price. I just think they also have, additional things that I like using. They include a 50 gigabyte cloud service, dark web monitoring, webcam security, and time-controlled program lockdowns. So that'd be things like a school mode, where let's say you install it on like your kid's computer, then they won't be able to access certain programs within certain time frames. So that kind of thing. It's pretty useful. It's on sale right now for $50 a year right now. So that's pretty good service, I'd say. The next one is AVG, in my opinion. AVG is 5668. It has a free and unlimited version, but the unlimited version is the paid one. And while the free one gets you access to just kind of the malware management tools, the unlimited version also gets you access to their firewall and online security tools. So I think it's pretty useful. Another good one is Avast. Avast is very similar to AVG, but it's $180.70 per year for up to 5 devices. The previous 2, I believe, were only for 1 device. So that could be a deal there if you've got 5 different things you're trying to install something on. Also, it's family focused, so like it's focused on like individual sales and small family kind of sales for their service. But also, business is there. It's just not their main focus for Avast. They also include a VPN, a USB scanner, identity protection, and IT support for their services, as well as a ransomware protection kind of insurance. So that's pretty useful. Then there's also Aura and Trend Micro. Aura is more focused on the family market as well, but has a VPN, can be installed on up to 5 devices. They just didn't have a good price posted. And then also, lastly, there's Trend Micro. Trend Micro is really aimed at small business as well as large businesses and enterprise. They're what we use here at Cornerstone, and I think they're pretty, direct, pretty easy to work with. They're pretty kind, but they're also business focused. So they don't have standard pricing online. But if you're interested in more of a serious, firewall and antivirus solution, I'd recommend Trend Micro. The last one I wanted to mention is you probably don't want to use McAfee. A few different people that I've talked to in the IT industry have actually classified McAfee as a virus themselves, even though it's antivirus. And the reason for that is because they can kind of be classified as malware. McAfee, when you install it, kind of makes uninstalling it obscure. So it's hard to, get rid of once you're done with it. And also they tend to kind of prompt you with other different bundles, different deals, different products you can lump together with your McAfee security software, and it just kind of inundates you with ads. So I personally don't recommend McAfee. They're valid antivirus. They do uninstall, malware. They do check for malware. They have a pretty good check, but I don't like all the ads that they push. So I just warn everyone to stay away from them, just generally as a public service. Now, the other thing I did want to mention before we move on from, anti-malware and firewall protections are that Windows Defender does exist, and it's kind of the basic kind of suite of stuff that comes with pretty much every Windows system. Windows Defender will run a scan on your hardware and software to ID malware. It has a bundled firewall, and it's free for all devices running Windows 8 for onward. The problem with it is it doesn't detect much malware when it's there. And also it has a lot of different content filters that only work in Edge for the firewall. So if you're not using, Microsoft Edge as your browser, it's not as useful as a firewall is concerned. Also, it's missing features with other firewalls and malware protection products, kind of like what I was saying with Norton. Norton comes with things like, VPN, dark web monitoring, that 50 gigabyte cloud. That's not something Windows Defender comes with, so it's not as great a deal as it might seem. Another thing you might want to be aware of is email filtering. It uses search techniques to filter different types of phishing emails, malware, and communications that could be coming into your device. We use one here, I believe a product from Trend Micro as well, but there are a few different ones that I can recommend. First being Spam Titan. Spam Titan's pretty good at filtering out spam. It's enterprise focused, and I think it's, pretty decent. It's 81 cents per user per month, so it's not going to break your bank, and it's far better than what's kind of default installed on most email services. Another one is Securance. That one's kind of the same deal, but it exceeds HIPAA standards, and it's $1.50 per user. And also there's Enable Assure, which is SolarWinds. SolarWinds is a pretty popular name as far as spam filtering is concerned. It's very easy to incorporate with Office 365, and they cost $1 per mailbox per month to secure. Trend Micro also has their own option for this as well, like I mentioned. The reason that I mention these kind of email filtering kind of solutions is because they're very easy to mess with. They are easy to, blacklist and whitelist different recipients on, and they can block specific addresses. Also, sometimes they block emails incorrectly though, so you do kind of have to watch them, make sure that some client mail isn't getting blocked, and they're not always 100% effective, but they're still better than nothing. I like using them personally just to make sure that I don't accidentally click on spam, but it's also useful because if you install a good one, they're staying up to date with things, you won't get nearly as many phishing or malware kind of things coming through. So they can be pretty useful. Another thing you might want to consider is a VPN, although I will say there are kind of different here with different types of VPN services. There's a public VPN, which is kind of what you see advertisements all over online for. Things like NordVPN, AT&T, Perimeter 81, and NordVPN all have enterprise options. I actually like them a lot personally, but a enterprise VPN is going to be different from a consumer VPN. The main difference is just what it connects to, though. So a consumer VPN is an encrypted channel between you and an online server, lets you browse the web anonymously. But a corporate VPN just lets you connect directly in an encrypted manner to a server that you control. So that's the general difference between corporate and consumer. You're going to want to make sure you have a corporate VPN if you're working remotely. And like I said, I do have a few different recommendations here. NordVPN, Viper VPN, Perimeter 81, and AT&T VPN are all pretty decent, and prices vary. My personal favorite, and the one that I use personally, is NordVPN, just because they're a very trusted name. I like them a lot, and their user interface is actually incredibly easy to use. So I like them. They have a enterprise option, and that enterprise option, functions very similarly to their consumer option. So I just tend to recommend them. That being said, if you have any questions, comments, or concerns, please feel free to type them in the chat now. That kind of generally covers overall internet security. So I hope you learned something new. I'm going to go ahead and answer questions now, but if you have anything else you'd like to ask, please feel free. Looks like the first one here from Kathy is I had WebRoot VPN. Get into sites, including my Gmail or printer. WebRoot said they keep, oh, okay, I see what you're saying. So basically you had your WebRoot VPN, but when you had it turned on, you couldn't log into websites like your Gmail or access your printer. That is possible. A lot of times with VPNs, the reason that they won't let you do that is because you're connected to a different network. A VPN is kind of like a private corner of the internet. The WebRoot VPN that you're using probably let you connect to their server directly and then browse the web. The problem with Gmail and a lot of other mail services is they run off of cookies to determine whether or not you have like your password typed in, your user account, all of that for autofilling. If you don't have the permission set to let those cookies pass through, then it's not going to let you actually log in, and you're not going to be able to use your printer because you're not connected to your actual home network, you're just connected straight to web root. So the VPN is more for when you're working remotely, not when you're trying to like print things off directly for yourself or for accessing, Gmail. It's really just for when you're trying to access a computer that you're trying to use on elsewhere. Or if you're connected to like public Wi-Fi, then a VPN could come in handy, because then people aren't seeing you directly. They're just, locked out of your connection to the web. So VPN's pretty useful if you're trying to log into something else from a laptop, but not very useful for like once you're within your own network. It is a little confusing though, Kathy. It's something that I hear all the time. So you're not the only one who has a problem with that kind of a thing. And I do not see any other questions coming up. I'm going to go ahead and stop recording the presentation. But as always, thank you for attending Tech Tuesday, and I hope you learned something new. Thank you.